Welcome to Madison College's Professional and Continuing Education's Class Preview channel. Get ready to learn quick tips and interesting information on a variety of topics. We are so glad you have joined us today. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Patricia Ferreira. This is printmaking on fabric made easy, and today I will teach you how to make a really simple stamp. Materials. These are the materials you will need. Paper for drawing your stamp. You will need pencil, eraser, Sharpie, scissors, one for paper, one for fabric, a knife. This is foam. It's the thick foam, and that's the one you want to use. A brush, a nice flat brush, a spatula, brayer, spoons, and speedball fabric printing ink. And you will also need the type of fabric you want to use for printing. I will use 100% cotton canvas fabric. Hello again. So the first step is to make the stamp. That's the first step on our printmaking session today. Here are some examples of what I want you to make. Your stamp should be inserted in a 4x4 inch square, and ideally I want you to work with images, motifs that are regular shapes that allow you to reverse the stamp and play with the rhythm of your stamp. So all these are regular shapes. There's a hexagon down there. This is a symmetric shape, so all the shapes here are symmetric and they all fit in a 4x4 inch square. Here are some other examples: a cross, a stripe, a sort of diamond shape, an ellipse. So whatever you have all the freedom in the world to create your own. We have some flexibility with textures. So some of these have stripes and different details inside, and I will show you how you can achieve some of those. So this top one is the one I picked, and now I'm going to transfer it to the foam material that I showed you earlier. So I use a really old school technique. So this is drawn in pencil, and it's pretty, I went with a pencil really hard, so it's really dark. And now I'm gonna flip my paper and put it over my foamy material. And all I'm gonna do is scratch the back of my paper with my pencil. So I'm basically painting with my pencil over it, and that works like a carbon paper, and it transfers the image onto the foam. And then I will go over it with a Sharpie so that it's so it doesn't fade away, and then I will proceed to cutting it out of the foam, and I'll show you how you can create all those details on your stamp. So this is how the back looks like, and now you can see my image. It's very soft, but my image has been transferred onto my foam. And now I'm going to go with my Sharpie and redraw my shape so that I have it on here. So I don't want to do the whole thing, but you can see how I'm like tracing my image. On my next video, I'm going to show you how to cut out my image with a knife and scissors. So here's the stamp. and I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna use a pair of scissors and also a knife for the details. With this technique, this material is very soft, so we can create incisions on the material by drawing over it really hard to create a relief effect. So some of the stuff that you see here, the details, I will achieve that way, and in other parts I will cut out sections to create holes. So the leaves I'm gonna draw over with my pencil, and so I'm gonna, some of the relief effects, I'm gonna do them before I cut the stamp so that it's more stable. So I will start by doing the lines on my leaves, for example. And so I'm going over those lines super hard so that when I go, the material recedes. And when I put my finger over it, I can feel a relief, like I can feel a real texture being created by my pencil going in there. So I'm gonna do that all over the lines on all my leaves. And you should, if you're doing something like this on details, you should be able to touch and feel that texture. So I will do it with the lines on my leaves, and I'm also gonna do it with some of the other details on my stamp. Like for example, there are circles here in the center and the circles on the outside of these petals. I will do it there as well. All that will be redrawn till I feel like my pencil is truly going into the foam. And then I'm gonna cut out some areas here. So in the petal, I will cut that middle section in each of my petals. That's another way to be able to achieve all these details with my stamp. Your stamp doesn't have to be so intricate. I just want to show you the different ways to create dimension and pattern within one single stamp. So we're trying to do a lot with one stamp, right? So this material is super easy to cut. So you can see how that I created that hole right away. So I'm gonna do this with the rest of my stamp. And then the last part, when I'm done cutting and redrawing areas, is to cut out the outer outline of my stamp, which I could do with my knife or with a pair of scissors. That makes it much easier. So I'm gonna start that just so you see how easy it is to cut the outline. It's super soft, super soft. Okay, so I'm gonna finish doing this, and when I'm done, I'm gonna show you how to set up your workspace for printing. Here's my stamp. I cut it out. All the areas that have detail have been redrawn with pencils so that they have a nice relief effect. And I played with cutting out some shapes to see more of the detail in my stamp. Next, I cut a 4x4 inch square, which I also removed the corners so that it's closer to the actual shape of my stamp. And I'm gonna glue my stamp onto that foam base. I will use a glue gun for that, and you don't need to apply a lot of glue. Just a very thin layer of it will be enough, because you also don't want the glue to become solid and then create what's it called, like a texture on your stamp. So I'm actually gonna do it in steps. So I did half right there, and it feels nice and flat. And now I'm gonna do the other half. So I just like lift it up a bit and I do the other half. You need very, very little. And the nice thing about this is that then you can wash it. So this is totally washable. So there it is, glued onto that base. And now we're ready to start printing. In my previous video, I was showing you the details on this stamp, so there you can see them. So I will apply a little bit more ink to make it nice and fresh. And now I'm gonna try my stamp. If you see little stains on the edge, it's helpful to have paper next to you to clean it up, because you don't want to transfer that onto your final piece. Whenever you take the brayer off your sheet, you want to flip it and lay it flat with the brayer side up. Okay, so now I'm ready to stamp and try it. So I flip my stamp down, face down. I put pressure over it with my hands. You could also help yourself with a clean brayer if you had a second brayer, but your hands are just enough. It's squishy, sorry. It's a squishy material, so if you press down, you should feel it pressing onto the fabric. Then to lift it up, you're just gonna lift it up from one end nice and smoothly. You're gonna put a hand to hold the fabric down and you lift it up. And I'm pretty happy with my first stamp. This is how it looks. I think it looks pretty nice. And so before I move on to my final piece, I wanna show you up close the way that it looks. Hold on a second. Sorry. So I want to show you how my station looks, and you can see my 3 steps with the brayer and the inking station, the stamp station, and my final printing station. Okay, on my next video, you will see how I actually print my final piece onto the fabric, and I'll show you how to lay it out, and we're gonna put marks to know how the repeat works. So now we're on to our printing stage. So I want to show you how to put marks on your fabric. So I use my stamp. So the edges of my stamp are really have been cut right by the shape of my stamp, so that when I print, the shapes touch, because that's what I want. I want to be able to have my shapes connect with each other. So if instead you had a circle, for example, and you wanted your circles to touch, you would want to have that base be as close to your shape as possible, so that the circles do connect with each other. Otherwise, you're gonna have to measure a tiny little overlap so that you know where to print. So in my case, my shape is right at the edge of my base, and I put the marks on my fabric right by that edge, right? So I placed my stamp down and I made marks on my fabric, just a tiny mark, so that I know when I print exactly where to place my stamp. And I obviously have my stamp face up. So I made a few of those marks, and they're right there. They're really teeny pencil marks that can be erased afterwards. So I'm printing like a fabric table runner. That's what I'm doing, but you could be printing a tote bag, or the fabric for a tote bag, or you could be printing tablecloth or table mats, or just fabric, and then you decide what you want to do with it. Something I didn't show you on my previous video is that I mentioned that you could be using a flat brush, And so flat brushes are really nice because they can lay the paint nice and evenly. So I'm gonna show you how you could be doing that. So I'm using paint from my acrylic sheet where I have my ink, and you could be laying your brush onto your stamp and be doing the same thing with a brush. It's a slower process, and it's gonna leave a slightly different texture onto the fabric, but it's nice. It's very nice. It's very it's a very valid option to do it this way as well. So this is how you would be applying the brush onto the stamp. But I'm going to continue with my brayer, so because I want to show you how you would go about printing. Okay, so super important, you need to have a roll of paper next to you to be cleaning your stamp as you go along. Like I told you earlier, every time that you're gonna ink your stamp every single time. When we print with on paper, we talk about something called the ghost print. We're not gonna play with that in this case. We're just printing directly onto fabric, and every time we print, we lift up our stamp and we need to re-ink it. So no ghost print in this case, not for this, because we want a consistent. You always, I'm noticing that there are sections that don't have ink, so I want to go over it again. Everything needs to look nice and shiny. That means there's ink on your stamp. So I'm placing it face down and ready to apply pressure. Nice and even pressure throughout, feeling that squishiness underneath my hands. And as soon as I feel like I've applied enough pressure, I'm gonna lift it up. Looks good. Ready for another one. By the way, the fabric I'm using is the same exact fabric I use for testing. And that's important, because if we use a different fabric, we could be getting a completely different result. So on to my next, and I'm going by my marks. So I have my marks that help me know where to place my next stamp. Applying pressure, lots of pressure. And lift it up again. Going by my marks and also going by my previous stamp. So you can look for references. So in my case, what I really want is for those leaves to connect with each other. And I'll show you how on my previous one, they're not connecting the way, the way I wish. So mistakes are common, and we can work out to avoid them. So I'm gonna keep going a couple more, and then I'll show you my mistake and how to avoid it. And I'm noticing how there's a section in my stamp that I seem to miss the application of ink. And those are all things that you'll notice as you go along. So on to my next. The tip of my leaves seem to not get enough pressure when I apply the pressure, and also not getting enough ink. So the least regular your shape is, the more chances that that can happen. Okay, and so far I'm not needing to clean up my stamp too much, which is good because it saves me time. Because the other issue is that the ink, after a bit, it lasts quite a while, but after a bit the ink will start to dry up, and you will need to clean up everything, brayer, sheet, and stamp, all of it. Okay, I'm gonna do a couple more and I'm gonna lift it up to show you how it's looking. Almost there. Okay, pressure, pressure, pressure. And one last stamp. And of course I'm way far from being done on this piece, but this is basically what I would continue doing for the rest of my stamp. Okay, last one. Lots of pressure. Okay, so here's the way it looks. The one at the bottom doesn't have the leaves connecting, and I wish it did. There's a little section. Also, you can see areas that have a little less ink than others. I kind of like that. That is normal. That is part of the beauty of block printing and printing with your hands. You're using your hands to do this. This is a handcrafted technique, and so those unevenness, that sort of imperfection is part of the beauty of the technique, that we don't want to make it look like it's screen printing or like it's a mechanic technique. This is fully handcrafted. So I'm going to continue for the rest of my piece all the way to the end to make that table runner, and then it will have to be finished in some way. The seams will need to be, I will need to create seams for it or some sort of finish. On my next tutorial, I would love to show you how to make a multicolor stamp where you could use more than one color. And there are many other techniques that I could show you with simple stamps. But this is our first, and it's a really fun way to achieve pattern and add, refresh things that you might have in your house that need a little upcycling. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me for another class.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this class preview. If you would like to learn more, visit our website at madisoncollege.edu/CE.